Hello, everybody. This is Michael Skiba, Dr. Fraud here. I'd like to welcome you to episode 10 of DFTV, What the Fraud series. So excited to discuss this topic with you today. I also have rock star guest Mark Alexander with me too, who I'm going to introduce in a minute. And really, you know, what the exciting thing about us talking about these topics is that they're so current as well. I mean, we're digging back over 100 years into this scheme and scam and con artist, but it's so current, and we're going to talk about that and how we can pick apart what happened then and kind of relate it to today. So that being said, really glad you're here. Thanks for joining us. We are live. I'm monitoring the chat. As you all know, I love to engage with you, so please throw some questions in there. Send some IMs to me as well. And I did get some questions ahead of time, so thank you for that. And we're going to get to those throughout the event. So keep your eyes on the agenda coming up for the upcoming schedule for us. We have probably every 2 weeks booked right through the end of the year. So any topics you want to see, I know I've been getting some nice feedback from you on certain cases or certain things you want to hear. So keep those suggestions coming. We're going to get those booked in as well. So definitely great to have you here. So let's kick it off. So Mark Alexander, I want to welcome you to DFTV. Thanks for being here this morning.
Thank you for the opportunity to join you.
Fantastic. So let me introduce Mark really quick. So Mark is a compliance executive. He works for one of the nation's top-rated hospitals in Illinois. He's a compliance risk audit executive with over 25 years of experience, worked for several different companies, Fortune 500, Global 2000 level, and very excited. He runs an awesome conference, the annual Chicagoland Fraud Conference, which I was involved in, which was, in my opinion, one of the best conferences domestically or even internationally I've been involved in. So, Mark, great job there. You knocked it out of the park a couple weeks ago at that. So, great to have you here, Mark.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Great topic too, by the way. Love it.
Yeah, we're gonna dive into this, you know, and as a native New Yorker, I really wasn't too involved in any of these discussions before. So when this topic came up of the Brooklyn Bridge, I mean, I've passed over the Brooklyn Bridge. I've taken pictures of the Brooklyn Bridge a million times. But knowing that there was a underlying scam and con artist behind this really intrigued me. So that's why, you know, we kind of picked this topic to pick apart. And again, like we said, there's so many underlying themes here that Mark and I are going to dive into that relate directly to today. So that's what we're really going to get into. You know, and I think, you know, one of the most interesting things when you look at just the statistics alone on just cons and scams, you know, it's hard to quantify, but the research I've seen puts it somewhere around $2-3 billion a year. You know, so it's just such an impactful area, something that you know, people should focus on, people and companies. And really, as Mark and I are going to talk about, it's really not that hard. I mean, there's a lot of preventative tactics that people and companies can take, all the way up to, you know, using technology to just basic human intervention, and kind of, and you know, keeping your eyes and ears open for these types of things. And that's what we're gonna get into today. So before we do that, a couple quick facts about the Brooklyn Bridge case. So the bridge opened in 1883, and it's interesting because this is when all the scams began. So immediately thereafter, you know, a bunch of people hopped on this bridge and tried to sell it. So this is what's interesting is, first off, you know, a con man, a fraudster would have the idea, you know, after such a iconic New York landmark was built, that hey, you know, I'm going to sell this thing and try to make some money on it. So Peaches O'Day sold it for $200. This is a famous story. She then cycled back in and became the mayor of New York. So this is what Mark and I are going to dive into a little bit there, talking about the deterrence factor. But one of the most famous con men was this guy, George Parker. And I think what really intrigued me about him was he sold it over and over and over. So, I mean, this was, you know, estimates show somewhere maybe of 100 times he sold this thing, you know, and one time he sold it upwards of $50,000, right? This is back in the early 1900s. So this is how he made his living. You know, research shows he also sold the Statue of Liberty and other landmarks. Madison Square Garden he sold a few times. So absolutely incredible. So really what he did was he targeted, he set a mark on a certain population, and that is a vulnerable population, immigrants. So New York, of course, was the hub of a lot of people coming into the country, and he really fed on that, fed on all those psychological aspects and vulnerabilities that they have. It's funny because I read an interesting story. I found something from NYPD that talked about how they actually regularly had to stop people on the bridge, stop owners who had been duped by George. They were trying to set up toll booths on the bridge. The police had to stop them because they were not officially the owners. This is when kind of the Band-Aid was pulled off and they realized that they had been duped. They were trying to set up these toll booths. So George actually, he was arrested finally, so there was a good result here. He served life in prison, was sentenced in Sing Sing, and he eventually died in prison. So I guess a good result that he was actually adjudicated and arrested after investigation. So Mark, tons of stuff to pick apart here. I mean, there's just so many interesting areas to look at, and I almost don't know where to kind of start with it, but let's, I guess, start to dive into the psychological aspect of it, because I think it's so important. And again, as we know, we see these types of scams being replicated today. So it's a different MO. So Mark, what do you think? I mean, would be, George, how did he picked that population? You know what I mean? Is that common that you've seen as well for scammers and con artists? To pick a population, target it, or do they more kind of throw out the net, if you will?
Yeah, it depends. I think I've seen both. But I think what they try to do is appeal to basic human nature. Is, everybody has something inside of them that wants to believe that they're unique. So we all have heard the term, there's no such thing as a free lunch, right? But then you think about that and say, well, there's no such thing as a free lunch except this one guy that's offering me a free lunch. So I guess I will go ahead and accept that because I am special. So it's these con artists, I call them artists because they are artistic. They work in the art of human nature and psychology to appeal to our senses, to appeal to our good nature, to take advantage of us, and they're experts at this. That's what they do. And it doesn't matter what background you come from, what socioeconomic background, gender, religion, anything of that nature doesn't come into play here. It appeals to our human nature. And that's why you see so many different types of scams that happen even today, right? So this is continuing today. And so many different types of people get caught in the net, so to speak. People that are maybe not taking the time to get educated, or those that are highly educated. So I think it's fascinating that you have these artists, these experts that have this ability to elicit in us our basic human instinct and to use that to their advantage.
Yeah, I think what's interesting too is you think of as you mentioned, you call them a con artist, and really, if you look at a lot of the historical, the bigger cons, they really use that power of persuasion, and they don't really do it by accident. I mean, it's very contrived. They understand. I mean, there's almost like and we see this in cases we have today on a bigger scale at a corporate level, that there's a certain, I call it a DNA, a fraud DNA, where, it's like certain elements are there and it's just replicated over and over in a different environment, and to your point, so when you look at the population, and it's so important to look at that too. So, fraudsters, we know, it's kind of like I equate it to like a tiger. When a tiger is looking for lunch, are they going to attack the head of the herd, the strongest, wildebeest? No, they're gonna look for the weak link in the back, the wary, a little bit more vulnerable or maybe highly vulnerable, than the rest. And that's exactly who the fraudsters focus on. So in this case here, it was the immigrants. You know, here you have an immigrant coming to the United States, not really knowing maybe the lay of the land and the business structure, and here you have this persuasive individual, George, talking about how they can, maybe gain riches from putting tolls in, or own a piece of America, this type of thing. So you definitely have that vulnerability piece, and translated today, I mean, even exactly right now, the things we're faced with. I mean, the vulnerable parties, and we see the fraudsters focusing on those same vulnerable parties today.
Exactly. And I think that, if you look at kind of break down the elements of this con game, you start with what you've been describing as the mark. Who is the mark, right, for this game? And the mark can be everybody, can be a very wide net, because one thing that these con games all have in common is they usually appeal to people wanting maybe more money, or some kind of a benefit out of it. And who doesn't want more money, or who doesn't want to own a bridge, right? That's great. So sometimes it depends on what the game is, but sometimes the net can be very wide. Then they do something I call it the setup. So they set up a kind of a story. They want to set up kind of a rapport. Michael, if you got a family, do you want to take care of them?
Mm-hmm.
You want to make sure they have the best that they can have, right? Well, I've got this, you seem like a really nice guy. I've got this idea here. I happen to own this bridge. This is really incredible. You walk by this bridge at this time, and let me tell you about it. So you start, to talk about this rapport together. Then you tell them a tale. Oh, let me pull up the deed, that I have of this bridge, and let's take a look at this. And I'll tell you what, it's probably worth $1,000, but I'm willing to give it to you today for $200, dollars. And this is just amazing. So that's kind of walking through what the elements are too, but it all relies, to your point, Michael, is on psychology and human nature. That's what this all relies on. It's not on facts. We throw those away. How can this person own this bridge? Like, seriously?
Right.
That all gets thrown away because we feel special. We feel like this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that we can't pass up. And who would be out here selling this bridge? Really, it's got to be a real story. And the more we get involved in the scam, the more we tend to believe it, because we don't want to believe that we're being scammed. So It's very interesting from a psychological standpoint.
Yep. And I think too, it's interesting because, when you look at the power of persuasion, right? I mean, and that's used in many different areas. I mean, even sales, sales training talks about that, the power of persuasion in a positive way, but it's still the psychological basis of certain factors. And I think what's interesting is that, in your example, there are certain things that I would dismiss, but other things that really would key in on me emotionally, right? So it's like when you try those 4 or 5 different tactics, providing for your family, like in your example, providing for your family, that might not hit me, but maybe it hits someone else. So there's all those different keys, and it's funny because when the scam artists, and this is what we see, they try those different approaches. Those 4 or 5 core element approaches, and knowing that probably one of those is really going to be the one that triggers you to take action. To click the buy now button. And I think that's really the key. And what one of them I see over and over again is that sense of urgency. God, I mean, everything. I mean, if you look at phishing scams and cybercrime, I mean, this is one of the key elements to a phishing scam, an email campaign is that sense of urgency. Your Netflix account is going to expire if you don't click here within, 3 hours, or they show a countdown timer. Your bank account will be foreclosed if this doesn't have, so there's always that that sense of urgency to this. And I think that's always a core element in a lot of the scams we even see today.
Absolutely, because, you know, one of my rules of thumb, because we still see this today in many different areas of pressure, and some of them I'm not going to say are scams, but they're pressure sales. So door-to-door sales are an example, where they're coming around to your home. So they've confronted you in your safest place, which is your home. They have this product, which is amazing, which, by the way, all your neighbors bought, you know. So
Right.
I'm only going to be in this neighborhood today only, and going to give you this price today only. And maybe it's a scam, maybe it's legit, but you generally never see them ever again. So, and that's a way of putting the pressure on and making you feel guilty and bringing in this whole social pressure of, well, everybody else has bought it, or I only have a few left. What does that sound like? Does it sound a little like QVC? Hey, they've only got 2 left. There's a clock ticking. I'm not at all, you know, alluding to the fact that QVC is a scam, but that's part of pressure sales. And that's an element of the con game, is that there is a time limitation. Why? Because usually when people tend to go and sleep on it and think about it longer, they start to really question the validity of whatever it is, and they may change their mind. That's why when you make big purchases in your life, for cars and for homes and for other things, things where the pressure is always being put on to make a decision right away, you should always sleep on it and think about it, you know, and think it through and make sure it's the right decision for you. This is happening today. It happens all around us. The examples are everywhere. It's very interesting.
Yeah, and I think, you know, a second element to that is that sense of belonging, sense of community, you know, not wanting to feel left. So it's like, it's 2 factors, right? One, you want to be a member of something, you want to belong to a club, a community, an organization, whatever it is. But secondly, you don't want to feel left out. So it's kind of, you know, a push and a pull at the same time. We've all been there. And I think, you know, again, from just from a sales perspective, because there is a lot of overlap. If you look at a lot of, you know, consumer ethics and things like that, there's a lot of overlap with what they're doing in that space, research wise, and what we're talking about. But it's so interesting because that is such a draw from a sales perspective, even is, okay, you know, buy this car and you're going to be a member of this elite community. You know, you're going to have this special keychain. I mean, these things are very enticing to some people. You know, some people might laugh and think, oh, you know, that doesn't matter, that doesn't trigger anything with me. But that is a very strong sense of community. People, you know, have that internal sense of wanting to belong to something. So when you include that in this, you know, again, getting back to the bridge in George, I mean, you have immigrants that want to, you know, they want to belong to part of America. You know, they want to buy a piece of this landmark. I mean, it's incredible draw. I mean, it's, you know, when you're just arriving into a country you want to belong to, that would be the biggest draw I think that you could probably have. So again, very contrived on the part of George to actually, you know, focus on this. And I think too that, you know, when you have that sense of urgency as well, there's always the element of scarcity, we call it, you know, scarce resources that, well, you know, this is not going to be available after this point. And that's really the, you know, psychological draw. And I think, you know, one of the things when we do our cybercrime training against, you know, phishing scams, this is one of the key elements that we try to train is don't even read the email. You know, do not look at the content. Don't let any of those psychological triggers hit. You know, just look at the facts, look at the URL, look at where it's tracked and things. I mean, those are the facts that you have to look at. So I think, again, even relating that to today, we see these same psychological, you know, elements, the DNA reprint today. Actually, we were just chatting before, and I mentioned I had a headline from this Brooklyn Bridge, and it said, you know, George Parker preys on wary immigrants. And then on the other side of my screen, I had you know, the Amazon Prime cyber criminals prey on unwary shoppers. So I mean, it was like you know, hundreds of years later, and we have the same, you know, same DNA, the same things going on. You know, so I think it's just again, it's fascinating to see those same things being you know, being replicated. But you know, when we talk about you know, prevention, if you will, you know, let's pivot a little bit to that. So, we chatted about, these psychological elements. So, in your opinion, what would be, from a corporate level, personal level, what kind of prevention, how do you prevent, yourself being scammed, but even from a corporate level too? How do we take what we just talked about from a psych perspective and put a different hat on and say, okay, how can we put up a wall, a barrier? What can we do?
No, that's a good point. I think that, we've talked about kind of the elements of how this con game works, right? And the psychology that we fall into to kind of, how does this happen to us? You hear this all the time. How did it happen to us? And then we talk about not wanting to admit, right, that something may have happened to us. People are embarrassed. So, and you have these con men and con artists who are artists, they're experts at this. And so how do you protect against this? Protect against our own human nature, protect against these con artists who are so good at what they do. Right now it's happening through emails and social media. So I give a lot of credit to the Georges of the world who did this in person live selling a bridge. I mean, that takes a lot of guts. So it takes a lot less guts to send an email and hope that, out of 1,000 people, maybe you catch one fish. So those are the real artists of the day, is these people that did it live. So what do we see today? We see this happening today. And I'll give you an example and relate it to, the elephant in the room, COVID-19. Our organization, hospital system, was solicited many times by many different con artists, I would call them, saying, hey, we have special access to PPE. We can get this for you. We've got a special supply that we can get you. So what are they preying on? They're preying on definitely a need. It's a chaotic time. So con artists are really good at recognizing needs in the time of chaos or transition, or what nobody could say no to. And so what can a hospital not afford to say no to is extra PPE, protective equipment. Number two, they create a profile, let's say on LinkedIn or Facebook, whatever, it looks legitimate. So looks like it may be legitimate to LinkedIn with all kinds of different people and so on and so forth. So, from the surfaces, they've created this persona, which all of these con artists do. They look reputable, or they use their credentials, like a Bernie Madoff did, say, former SEC chairman, who's going to suspect this guy of taking my money? So you look at, first of all, you have to be familiar with what are they trying to do? Are they trying to sell me something that is going to appeal to my nature and I may jump on, like they do in the grocery lines where you have these impulse buys, right, at the last minute? That's why they put those things at the registers, because they figure you might just impulse buy it. So take a second and think it through. Secondly, who's your source? Who is this person? What do you really know about this individual? They claim that they are the owner of this bridge. How do we know that? Have we validated that? So the best weapon against not falling into these type of traps is to, first of all, look at them all as a business situation and don't fall into the emotional aspect of it. I think you're alluding to that. Don't even read the email, because you're going to somehow get sucked into the story. It's the story that pulls us in. And secondly, validate the source. And if there's ever a time element on these things where you have to do it now, otherwise it's gone, I would be very suspicious of whatever it is. And to make sure, because it took a lot of years for, like, let's say a state of Illinois, to put in a law that says you have 3 days, right, to go ahead and rescind any type of contract or agreement. Why did they put that in? Because they wanted people to have 72 hours to be able to go back and say, geez, I made a mistake, or I did this on an impulse and I didn't mean to sign this agreement. So I think those are, some things to be aware of. Your own human nature, the source. Is there a time pressure element to this? Think about this. Is the deal going to still be there if it's tomorrow? And if it's not, do I feel comfortable with jumping into this? And so corporations are susceptible. You're susceptible through email and social media. So you have to use your common sense. It's really hard because these people are really good and they're doing it today. There's a scam currently going around on Amazon that says your package is shipped, right, but we're having a problem. Can you please verify your information, right? And they've made it look just like Amazon, where you fill in your address and your credit card information because there's a problem with processing of your transaction. And then what it does is it processes all that, and then it redirects you to the real Amazon website. So it's a really good looking scam. From that standpoint, it looks legit because it redirects you back to Amazon, the actual Amazon website. And so what you have to do, once again, in looking at the source, is don't ever respond to an email through phishing, as we know, and links in those things, because you don't know if they're from a legit source. So that's one of the first things you do, is you check the source. Where is this coming from? So those are some things, I think, some tips that we can use to help protect ourselves against these scams, which are happening today, every day.
Yeah, and I think, it's interesting, and we see this, that, with the one increased traffic online right now. So twofold, since March through, in the lockdown, when everyone's been forced, to be in more of an online environment, what that's done is two things. One, it's put just an incredibly more amount of data in circulation, right? So there's so much going around now. You have everyone working remote, more people shopping online. I mean, there's just so much more data that's being put in circulation. And of course, that data, that is the new oil and the gold to fraudsters, right? This is what they want right now. So, there's just more of that right now. So what that's doing is, and we've seen this, is it's drawing the criminal element and scammers and, from different areas into, operating in this space now. So, other, even organized criminal, we see this a lot more now, where the organized, I mean, there's a difference. George Parker was there's different types of fraudsters, as we know. George Parker was kind of or this is his own little bucket, but there's also those major organizations, those organized crime groups that run these like corporations. And I think we're seeing this more now, where we're seeing ties, to certain scams here, to overseas and other areas. And really it's because there is that draw. There's that data out there, number one, but number two, there's the vulnerable parties. You have more kids online now, so we've seen an incredible spike in activity of children being targeted for certain scams, and just, again, what they're looking for a lot of times is, anything from, right, full credit card, background, social security number, but sometimes it can just be little snippets of information, access into your computer, into your accounts, getting just a name and an address or something, because then they keep putting those pieces of the puzzle together. So, they can grab those things without you actually engaging on a large level. So, we're seeing that draw come in from different areas. But, again, the cyber world right now, in my opinion, is just such a huge threat that we're just seeing spikes everywhere in this, and corporations, absolutely. And I think, just to your point too, there's a huge human element to this prevention, right? I mean, we could talk about all the technology platforms and things that can be used, which are fantastic. There's certain tech things you can do, but at the end of the day, right, it's in my opinion, and it sounds like yours as well, it's human intervention, right? It's just the gut feeling and the just try to negate those psychological factors that we've been talking about, is basically what be the lesson learned.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that, because as you said, there's so much data out there now. And so you see different types of scams where they're trying to cast a wide net and see what fish will bite, but then there are also the targeted scams. We talked earlier about the example of maybe me knowing a little bit about your background, or whether you have a family, or whether you have a dog. Guess what? I can probably find that out. I can find that out by looking on Facebook and looking on social media and collecting information about that, and then target you. And you won't suspect it, because you think, wow, okay, they really know me, or, how did they know that I do that? And so you feel special. And so you feel special. And so you respond, and those are not just inadvertent emails. Some of these are very calculated and use all kinds of data to target you. And the
Right.
more you are targeted, the more likely we are to fall for it because it seems more legitimate, which is absolutely crazy nonsense. But that's a phenomenon I've noticed, is the more it is customized to you, the more you feel it is for you, and therefore you're special, and therefore you should pay attention to it. Which is just very interesting phenomenon.
Yep. Yep. So great. I think there's some great final thoughts, Mark. Any final thoughts on this case other than, you're not going to buy a bridge? I'm not going to buy the Statue of Liberty in the near future. Any final thoughts to either from the consumer end or the corporate end on prevention?
Yeah, I hate to be a cynic, but just be vigilant. Be vigilant and know that these people are out there and pray, and they're excellent, and they're preying upon your human nature and from a psychological perspective, and that's the way you have to protect yourself. They're appealing to your emotion, and good business people shy away from that. And when you talk about sales, these people are salesmen. Who are the best salesmen? They're usually pretty narcissistic, right? They're strong personalities. They're very influential. So, think about who you're dealing with. Of course, social media puts a whole new aspect into it where it's not a face-to-face transaction like George, which is amazing, but they're still appealing to you and your human nature. So that's one of the best ways to kind of look at this and try to help prevent being a victim.
Absolutely. Yep. I fully agree. And I think, this case showcased, again, this, occurred back in the early 1900s, but we see the same, similarities in these scams today and the vulnerable parties. And I think it's really, just not making yourself a vulnerable party, just make it harder, for the scammers. Simple as that increased awareness, from a consumer level, right? Just create that awareness with your family or your kids or your if you have grandparents, they're often a target too, because they're considered that vulnerable population. So, make sure that you're spreading the word, doing your diligence within your household, but also on a corporate level as well, right? It's having those certain protocols, those people in places to actually, be able to identify these types of situations, but then also develop protocols and then create that feedback loop, the necessary feedback loop to all your people, that they don't, fall for any of these type of situations that come up. The USB scam, that's my favorite one. That's still, we see percentages upwards of 30-40% of an unmarked USB being sent to a company, and 30-40% of the people still open it. It's just because it's all those things we talked about: curiosity, missing out, what's on it, is it, photos from who knows what. There's so many elements to that, but creating that awareness on a corporate level. So fantastic. So, Mark, thank you so much. This was a great case. We should have probably booked more time. This was fantastic. I also want to thank we had Zakir and Dika. Thanks for joining. I know I'll grab some of your questions after as well. So thank you all that were on the live edition. And we're going to also put this on YouTube. So if you guys have any questions down the road on this topic or anything else, please let us know. So, Mark, how can anyone reach you if they would like to follow up with you on any of these topics?
Oh, sure. You can reach me on LinkedIn. So please look me up on LinkedIn, Mark J. Alexander. I'm happy to link in with you and answer any questions. That's the best way to reach out to me. So I'm looking forward to it. If anybody has any questions or like to chat, I certainly welcome that.
Fantastic. And also to check out Mark, Chicagoland Conference, definitely worthy. Do you have a date or anything for that next year, Mark? Or
no, we usually do it in May, which got disrupted this year because of COVID. So we might try to return to the schedule. But annual Chicagoland Conference, and I usually put that out on LinkedIn. So if you're following me on LinkedIn or link in with me, then you'll certainly be notified when that happens.
Fantastic. Great, Mark. Well, thank you for your time. I also want to, again, thank everyone that was on the live event. If there's any questions you have for me, you guys know how to get a hold of me. So we will be doing episode 11 in 2 weeks. So stay tuned for the agenda and the topics there. And please continue to send me your feedback. And just from us at DFTV, just want to wish everyone a great, safe day. And we'll talk to you soon. This is Dr. Fraud.
Thank you, Dr. Fraud.